Welcome to a noob's guide to MALUS DARKBLADE. This is MALUS DARKBLADE, the Tyrant of Hag Graef, and in Warhammer, the Dark Elves are basically Canadians, which makes him a power-addicted skid from upcountry who tried to take down a big city slam and instead hoovered some demon schneef and wound up an even bigger degen than before. MALUS DARKBLADE is the bad boy Dark Elf, who encouraged a generation of female readers to again fix the bad boy listato. Who am I kidding? No girls read this stuff. These videos have like 98% male viewers. MALUS DARKBLADE is the epitome of teenage male edgy power fantasies, where his only goal is for the world to recognize how awesome he is. Complicating this is the fact that he must wrestle with changes in his body that he can't control while struggling to find his place in society. It's a puberty metaphor. MALUS DARKBLADE is basically 13 reasons why personified. He refuses to give up even when it's a bad idea and pushes everyone around him to their deaths for his own amusement. And yet despite this, Malus is a character that is still fun to read, and you root for him even though he's a villain, because somehow he manages to show growth over his book series, even when Games Workshop only publishes stories written by a room full of monkeys with typewriters. So what you're left with is a character who doesn't know the meaning of the word quit, who struggles on in the face of insurmountable odds, sometimes with or without a soul, and little things like the skin that covers his body, all because of a greater desire to prove himself. And if that's not a metaphor for life in the 21st century, then I don't know what is. MALUS DARKBLADE's backstory starts off as typical Dark Elf drivel, because, as I mentioned before, in the world of Warhammer Fantasy, the Dark Elves are basically Canada, and there's nothing more Canadian than an emo sadomasochist who spends too much time listening to Marilyn Manson in high school and never went outside without his leather duster from The Matrix, so you couldn't tell if he was playing with himself or a Glock under his black jacket. On second thought, the Dark Elves might be American. There's just a confusing lack of guns. The bastard child of the General of Hag Graef, someone at Games Workshop read Game of Thrones and liked the idea that all their northern bastards were called Snow, and thought, what is the most generic evil thing I can co-opt to call my elves? Well, I know, Darkblade. And frankly, it's such poor writing, I refuse to say it. So Malus Dimhorn here grew up exemplifying all the virtues expected of a Druchii: unscrupulousness, cruelty, cunning, and ambition, poising him to become a commander of Dark Elven armies or a warehouse manager at Amazon. But Malus Blacksaber wouldn't become the next ruler of Hag Graef without power, so he set off into the Chaos Waste in search of treasure to buy his way into high society. Malus Pitchdagger's Wikipedia page is almost as long as John Holmes Johnson, so I'm not going to cover the whole thing here. Instead, I'm going to assume that despite most of your YouTube comments, you do know how to read and encourage you to check out the books. But the high note of his series is when, in his greed, he accidentally unleashed the demon Zarkan from the realms of chaos, which is sort of like going to Disneyland when your kid has measles. And now, after a series of wacky Odd Couple-style murderous hijinks and escapades, the comedic duo of Zarkan and Malus begin the game with the demon threatening to forever drink Malus Dim Knife's eternal soul and doom him to perpetual torment. But lucky for you, Malus Gloomsword has proven to his boss, Malekith the Witch King, that having an interdimensional STD does have its perks. For one, he never feels alone anymore, as the demon's voice is constantly taunting him inside his head.
You will always be lost.
Though this voice that's in-game must be region-specific, because mine sounded a bit like Foghorn Leghorn.
Boy, I said boy. Now pay attention to me, boy. I'm not just talking to hear my head roll.
If you're wondering why my demon Zarkan sounds like he sits around sipping mint juleps on the front porch of his plantation, it's because you begin the Vortex and Mortal Empire campaigns on the far sides of the Warhammer world in the deepest Southlands. Which brings us to the elephant in the room. Malus Duskcleaver here isn't in Not Africa for a safari. One of Games Workshop's parting shots to the colonies was to cast them as marauding slavers who only seek their own pleasure and the destruction of all that is beautiful in the world in the name of capitalism and democracy. I mean, evil. Evil, obviously. So your campaign as Malus Shadowshank, I kid you not, has you collecting slaves to send back to the New World, so they can then be used to mine and craft goods to be sold to the Old World to fund the Witch King's wars, and then hire generals to go back to the Southlands to pick up more slaves. Which means you're personally helping to perpetuate the triangle trade in this campaign.
Now that is slander against a capitalistic enterprise.
And somehow, it actually gets worse, as this DLC also comes with new units to help collect Malus's exportable goods. The first is the new High Beastmaster General, who gives buffs to every kind of monster in the Dark Elf roster so you can field your own crass menagerie, though he loses points in my book for not having 2 ferrets, BDSM gear, and a creepy eyeball ring. Instead, this Beastmaster rides around on a dinosaur-drawn chariot or manticore with a bonus to anti-large in combat, and I'm sure that's what the whip is for, spanking the big guys, and the chariot. Definitely not whipping slaves, even though it's in their original description. And accompanying him is the new Dark Elf hero unit. Oh man, I really don't want to say this.
The Masters, we call them Masters. See, Masters is upstanding boys of unimpeachable character, from good families and noble houses, doing the best they can to get ahead and serve their sweet home of Alabama Nagaroth. And of course, parts of that is keeping your slaves in order, but it's a tiny part now, so don't you go denigrating what makes their society beautiful. It is an institution, so don't you be talking bad about none of them Nagaroths.
These dreadlords in the making haven't proven themselves in battle yet, so they're eager to show off in hopes of taking future commands. In battle, they're a nice tanky option that helps hold the line, and on the campaign map, they encourage growth wherever they are and help reduce the loss of slaves, so I guess that makes them the good masters? Slaves have always been a part of the Dark Elf economy in Warhammer II, and they were even part of Difflin's mechanic in Thrones of Britannia, but they've never felt so front and center. I'm making jokes about it here, but really there's no denying you are playing the baddies in this game. You even start with a slaving Black Ark ship right off the coast, ready to whisk people away. So if you play as MALUS Foggy Rapier, be prepared to just embrace it all, name your ship the Amistad, and go to work expanding mass bondage across the Dark Continent, and realize that this is probably as close as we'll ever get to a Confederate States Civil War faction in a Total War game. But Malus Dusky Dirk has found other ways to make money in the game. Pulling a De Beers Diamond Company, he's poised to take over the Southlands and exploit it for its natural resources, gaining 30% additional income from mining. And if anyone objects to your diamond monopoly, you can always feed them to your Cold Ones, as Malus's talents reduce recruitment cost and upkeep for any Cold One knights, chariots, or dread knights in his army, thanks largely to his connection with his unique Cold One mount, Spite. Normally, Dark Elves have to slather themselves in an awful-smelling perfume to make themselves so unappetizing Cold Ones won't eat them, but Smite is such a loving velociraptor that he's the closest thing Malus has to a friend.
Who's a good velociraptor? Who's a good skater, good boy? You best be scratching that good boy's tummy and feed him some slaves you want to keep him happy.
Malus is unique in that he begins his campaign as a military ally of Nagorond and the Witch King Malekith, something Malekith doesn't even offer to his own mother, because even in a world of murder elves, it's still bros before hoes. And like the best bottom bitch, your objective in the Vortex campaigns is to collect and mail scrolls of Icardi back home to Witch Pimp Daddy Malekith, which is exactly the same as every other Dark Elf campaign, even spawning an army every time you reach one of the nodes. But the difference here is someone else is worrying about minding the Vortex, and you're just concerned with sending 5 shipments of magically enchanted post-it notes to Witch King Metal Pants so he'll finally tell you how to make your own elixirs of control. Just conquer locations with the glowing symbol, build the requisite building, and rinse repeat until you've completed this literary fetch quest, allowing Malus Jetcutter to finally issue an emancipation proclamation to the demon Zarkan. But much like Chumbawamba, he will get back up again, because your possession meter constantly ticks north every single turn, and special missions from Zarkan threaten to move it ever closer to overtaking Malus's soul. And only these handcrafted Jaeger bombs can take the edge off your demon counter, knocking it back down again by half with each new shot. You create them by sending shipments or pressing this little button here. But these elixirs aren't free, and since you need their soul-saving juices to keep you from going full demonic, Malekith makes sure to charge you a bit more every time you ask for them. So yeah, I guess the Dark Elves are definitely American. But the choice of whether or not to spend more money on healthcare is made a little easier on turn 2. You start all your campaigns with your army on one side of the world and your capital on the other, basically splitting your forces. So it's a relief when a shadowy Scrooge McDuck offers to buy Hag Graef off of you for a princely sum. You can take it and be swimming in copious coke money in the Southlands, or you can reject it, disband your army, and then rehire them all back in the frozen north to begin a very different campaign, because only Germans are dumb enough to fight a 2-front campaign. Twice. Your second big choice in this campaign is whether to be an arcane crack addict or an upstanding evil general. If you choose to wean yourself off of your purple meth demon, people will actually start to trust you to manage armies and lead a nation. And when you're in full control and regularly attending AA meetings, you can actually unlock the right of the War Master. It instantly recruits an army of everything that goes bump in the Dark Elf Knight that isn't already being bumped by the Cult of Pleasure. Hydras, Black Dragons, Cardibus's, Medusas, Scourge Runner Chariots, and Cold Ones armies will all spawn at your faction's capital, and if you have a decently leveled high Beastmaster around, this is your new win button. And this army just so happens to feature the 3 new Dark Elf units that come with this DLC. Scourge Runner chariots are what happens when someone gets the brilliant idea of sticking crossbows on chariots, so you can both roll and shoot at the same time. It's truly revolutionary. The Bloodrack Medusa is a ranged monstrous artillery piece, and the Bloodrack Shrine, oh no. The demon
That scaly girl is hotter than a prostitute and a pew on Sunday. Just looking at her will make your ears sweat. They even put that Petunia up on a pedestal. She gonna cause more confusion than a Skaven at a burlesque show.
And that's how you banish a demon. But when the feces hits the fan, there's only one person you'll be turning to, and you'll probably want to sell your mom's microwave to ride that pink pony again, to become an unstoppable force of nature that can take down 4 cops at a time and shoot purple lightning from his fingers with unlimited power, instantly restoring your health and letting you spirit bomb your enemies, because when fully hopped up on grape drink, Malus Black Edge can go super safe. Afterwards, you may feel a twinge of remorse and want to switch back to methadone, and Malus's skill tree encourages you to choose between these 2 lifestyles. But don't worry, Zarkan will always be there for you, waiting to welcome you back into his warm, fuzzy folds when you need him. And that's a noob's guide to Malus Darkblade, the Tyrant of Hag Graef. But seriously though, don't do drugs. Meth will mess you up, and I can only imagine what Greater Demon meth does to your teeth. Probably turns them into fangs or gummy bears that scream all the time when you chew.